In 1936, however, Mao's line changes. He calls for unity against Japan. Rich and poor must stand together. An end to civil war. Nationalist, communist, warlord, all must stand as brothers against the alien threat. In December 1936, Jiang flies off to see the young marshal in Xi'an, to flog him on to sterner effort. In Xi'an, however, communists have convinced the young marshal that civil war must stop.
Then there happens one of those episodes that sound as if they were written in the book of make-believe. And again, we have no photographs because no one invites a photographer to witness a kidnapping, which was what happened next. Jiang was there to urge them to fight the communists. And on the night of December 11th, he was sleeping in a villa outside of town when he was awakened by gunfire. And the young marshal and his troops were shooting their way into his villa and trying to kidnap him. Jiang was in his nightshirt and bare feet. He slipped out the back way, tried to climb over the wall, fell, he hurt his back, he lost his false teeth, his feet were bleeding as he ran over the rocks, and the young marshal's soldiers caught him and brought him back. It sounds mad, but that's the way China was, and it got even madder, because when they brought him back, they invited the communists down from North Shanxi, and on December 15th, the communists, the young marshal and Jiang, all sat down to talk. The communists and the young marshal said to Chiang Kai-shek, "It's time to end the civil war. We must all unite against the Japanese, or else." They could have killed him, but they didn't. And Chiang Kai-shek agreed. He would halt the civil war, and he would form a united front against the Japanese. And so on Christmas Day, they gave him a plane, and Chiang Kai-shek and the young marshal flew down to Nanking to announce the civil war was over.
Christmas 1936. At Nanking, members of the government await their president's return. In pain, he hobbles out, announces to the world, a popular front of Kuomintang and communists will now, united under his command, turn to face the menace of Japan.
Frankfurt School formally opened its doors on June 22, 1924, but it had already held its first seminar on theory in the spring of 1923. There, almost 24 Marxist scholars gathered for what Weil, the sponsor, called a Marxist study week. One of the participants was Richard Sorge, later a famous Soviet spy.
By the end of October 1941, Hitler's army was closing in on Moscow. Stalin's defenses were further weakened by fear of a Japanese strike in Siberia. Army divisions badly needed to defend Moscow were tied down in the Far East to face a possible Japanese attack. The Japanese were still contemplating where to strike next, at the Soviets in Siberia or at the British and Americans in Southeast Asia. The key Soviet spy in Japan, Richard Zorge, had many agents and friends close to the Japanese government. For months he'd been trying to convince them that the Japanese would be much better off getting hold of the precious resources of tin, rubber, and oil in Southeast Asia, rather than face a difficult winter campaign in Siberia. In time, Zorge learned that Japan had abandoned all plans to attack the Soviet Union. This was the news Stalin had been waiting for. Having correctly predicted the German invasion, Zorge had the...
Mr. Osaki, allow me to introduce Dr. Richard Zorge of the Frankfurter Zeitung.
Utsumi Ozaki, the Asahi newspaper. Utsumi Ozaki, the Asahi newspaper.
Richard Zorge. Glad to meet you.
Mr. Osaki has better insight into the conflict with China than Konoe.
Winter is near. Remember what happened to Napoleon.
Japan won't invade Siberia.
Utsumi Ozaki, the Asahi newspaper.